Yeah.
All right, and here we go. Hi, what's up, mediums? Welcome to The Writer's Journey, the show where we are on a journey together to learn more about writing success. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Lauren Moore, and with me is the clever and beautiful Kayleen Williams. Tonight, we're talking about how to balance your family life with your writer life. How's it possible? I don't know. We're going to find out together. Diaper explosions, 2 a.m. milk runs, t-ball practice, first steps, and first words. Family life demands so much of your mental energy and time. How does a writer balance that with their writing career? Husband, dad, military vet, and sci-fi writer James S. Aaron is here to discuss tips, tools, and strategies for navigating family life while meeting your author career goals. James S. Aaron is the author of 8 novels and many short stories. His most recent series is The Sentence Wars, Solar War 1, written with M.D. Cooper, in his Aeon 14 universe. He's a 12-year U.S. veteran, serving as a medic and later platoon leader and company commander. I got that right. His novels draw heavily on military experience, including the people, deployments, technology, and locales that he witnessed and experienced and puts them in his book, In Space. James lives in Oregon with his family, where he enjoys camping, hacking electronics, amateur carpentry, and all things science fiction. He's a member of the Science Fiction Writers of America and volunteers at his local animal shelter. Aww. He has a 17-year-old and a 1-year-old, so while he's an idiot, his house is full of love. I did not write that. He did it. Thank you for joining us, James.
Thank you for having me. I was hoping you could tell me how to balance family and writing. That's why I'm here. So
no, I have no children. I have a Nana. I take care of Nana full time. That's me. Kayleen, tell us, what's your family life like?
Well, I have my mom and my daughter. She's 8. So yeah, she'll come in and she'll be like, because she's old enough now, and I've talked to her about writing, and mommy can't make the books if I don't write the words. And she'd be like, you know what, mama? I'm gonna let you write for the next half hour. Yeah. And then we can go play Lego Worlds, okay? And I'm like, uh-huh. And about 30 seconds later, she'll come in and be like, can we play Lego Worlds? I'm like, that was a really fast half hour.
Right. And how are you supposed to write a book in a half hour?
Right.
Out. And James, tell us
exactly. What's that? I just lost what you said.
Oh, tell us about you.
Oh, about me. Yeah. Let's see. I love when anybody outside Oregon pronounces Oregon. In fact, I have a friend who always says Oregon just to mess with us.
As it came out of my mouth, I was like, that's not right.
That's okay.
I held it in. I held in the laugh. I'm like, oh, okay.
It can also be, if you say Oregon, then you're like an insider. So, yeah, I think the bio covered most of it. I've been involved with writing since I was 14. I interned at a newspaper when I was growing up. I've got a degree in journalism, and my career has always kind of taken two forks, where I've had writing on one side and then the Army and things that pay the bills on the other side. And so I actually was part of a small publisher from 2000 until 2007, right before ebooks took off. So we designed print books, we did events, we sold books online through the website and through Amazon, but never made any money. And then right after that, ebooks took off. And I tried to start a distillery. And so I was trying to sell whiskey from 2010 until 2013. And when I realized that wasn't going to make any money, that's when I kind of turned back to writing really seriously. And so I've been seriously working on my writing as a novelist since 2013, and jumped into indie publishing in 2014. And I've always been in a place where I had a family, I have a full-time job. And so things have worked out really well as far as co-writing. And I've been doing a lot of co-writing. In fact, I had published 3 novels. And when I got the opportunity to work with Mal Cooper, I unpublished those novels, and I've just gone full steam ahead with Aeon 14. And then as other co-writing opportunities have come up, I've jumped into that. And that's one of the things I'd love to talk about, is how co-writing, I think, is something that works out really well with having a family. And there's a bunch of different reasons for that. But it's great to, have a hobby and make money at it. And then, I don't know. So that's something I wanted to talk about. But yeah, that's mainly what I'm doing right now. Is work is busy. So most of my writing is still Aeon 14. And I've recently been reading Slush for a publisher again, so it's pretty exciting to be getting back into publishing stuff. So,
awesome. Are you allowed to say
that's me.
which publisher?
They asked me not to, so I would not be inundated with potential requests. But it's been really cool, and I would recommend it to anyone because it's really kind of reteaching me about what it takes to make a manuscript like really sing, from the first page.
Right.
And so, plus just the breadth of stuff that is out there, is interesting. So,
yeah. That might be the hardest job in a publishing house would be the slush fund guy. But you're the first one to get your hands on those manuscripts, the first eyes on them. So that's got to be an exciting feeling to catch that diamond in the rough and maybe pass it on. And then in a year or longer, however long it takes to get that published, to see what it becomes, a diamond when it gets published and then take off. That'd be exciting.
Yeah, it's been really fun so far. It's time consuming, but it's fun. So, but anyway, that's about me. I guess you just mentioned my time in the Army. I was enlisted. I was an officer, and I've been out of the Army since 2005, and now I work in law enforcement. So I've had a pretty good experience between those two things with writing, in the middle.
And you've got proof that you're a writing dad kind of all around you. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. This is my daughter's room, and we're actually in the midst of doing some renovations. So right now, this is my office, and what I don't want to show on that side of the camera is just a pile of crap that is like covering her bed, because unfortunately, what's that?
This is the real thing. This is the real deal.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And a writer.
And finding a place to write, I think, is super important, and it's one of the things I need to figure out. Actually, she's still in the bed with us, which is, it is what it is. But when we finally get her in here, sleeping in her own bed, I need to find another place to write. So I may actually build myself a shed out in my backyard where I can go write.
She shed.
Yep. Yeah. So it's
writer's life day look like for you with your family, with your daughter?
Yeah. And that's one thing that has been, it changes constantly. And when she was born in May of 2018. And we had kind of I was on paternity leave, and I actually got a ton of work done when I was on paternity leave because I had time to write. But now it just changes all the time, and I have to be ready to kind of roll with the punches. So right now, I really can't work in the mornings. And I used to get up at 5. That was my time to write. I would get up at 5 a.m. and write for 3 hours before I went to work. And now, basically, when she gets up, it's the cutest thing ever. Like, I love to wake up with her. It's so fun because she's super happy and smiley. But I take care of her in the morning so my wife can sleep. And so typically, I get up, take care of her feed her, entertain her and whatnot until about 8:30 when I need to go to work. Then I go to work. I try, work right now is kind of the only consistent time that I can carve out space to write. So lunchtime is when I work on a college campus, so I can go take my lunch in a student union area or something like that. And that's a place where I can write. And so I'll look for those places in my schedule where I can make time to write. So I do that during the day, depending on what my schedule is, and then come home, spend time with my family. Typically we're getting her to bed by 8:30 or 9, spend time with my wife so I don't get divorced. And then usually between maybe 10:30, 11 until 1 a.m. That's when I would try and do some writing again or podcasting or things like that. So carving out that time, and I can't even necessarily depend on that time. So I have to kind of roll with the punches on that. And that's, I just look for those spaces where, okay, it looks like she's getting more consistent in this. It's almost starting to look like she does want to sleep until 7 a.m. every day, which means it might be possible for me to try getting up at 5 if I don't wake her up. So we'll see what happens with that. But I'm always sort of sensitive to where she's, okay, there's a little bit of stability here, so I can maybe carve out some time to do work, So, right. But that's what life looks like right now.
Yeah, because you got to be brain dead by the time 9, 10, 11 comes around.
Yeah, it's hard. And my job is pretty mentally demanding too. So one of the things that I do is I outline really as detailed as I possibly can, so that if I need to jump in and write, I know what I need to write. Because if I don't know what I need to write, that's where the being brain dead just kills me, because I sit there and stare at the page and don't know what to do, and I just will have wasted time. So So that way, if I know where I am in the outline and I know what I need to write, then if I only have 15 minutes, it's really easy to jump in and do that, for me. So.
I do have to say, yeah, you definitely have to be super flexible, and can't let that like get you down or stop you. Just have to be like, okay, this happened. Now we're doing this. And I actually did like a really super quick outline. It wasn't detailed. It was just like, yeah, bah, la la, Lord Reddit. And I was actually able, I mean, I've been harping over this thing for like a month and a half. And then I just wrote that thing really quick. So I'm like, it's due in a week. And I wrote it in 3 days just because I had that outline. I followed it, did check marks, and then just wrote exactly as you said. Whenever there's time, whenever I see time, get down. If it's 2 sentences, it's 2 sentences. But
yeah. No, that's absolutely something that I had to totally let go of, like this whole idea of the muse or something that, I gotta wait for that to strike me. Like, no. And I also like two sentences, like you're saying, if that's what I got, I'm happy, I'm happy I got something. And it's the consistency of doing it is what will get you something. If you look back at 3 days and you didn't write, for me, I at least want to jump in and do something, always trying to be focused on writing something. So, and I'm not always successful. I don't want to stand here and act like that works all the time. It doesn't, but I am always trying to push myself to do something that way. And then one thing when I do get time, like my wife and I, one of the things I was going to talk about was communication with your spouse. Cause I talk with my wife a lot about what my goals are, what my deadlines are, like, hey, I need to get this done by this time. And then she's actually reminding me sometimes like, hey, don't you need to do this? Or don't you have this number of words you need to get out? And we just know that like it takes me a half hour to write 1,500 words. So if I need to get 10,000 words, that's 3 days worth of work, that we need to carve that time out somewhere. But if she gives me that time, I don't waste it. If I wasted those 2 hours on Facebook, I'm a jerk. So I definitely don't want to disappear for 2 hours and not do anything, because at the end of the 2 hours, she's depending on me to come back out and spend time with the baby, right? Because she's frazzled at that point. So I try to be really aware of that, and using the Pomodoro method works really well for me because that I know exactly how much time I have and can jump in and and write during that time. So you're doing a mixture of being structured in your day, knowing exactly which periods you're going to have available, but also being flexible in your mentality as in your approach, because sometimes parenting does not allow you to follow the plan. No, not at all. Yeah, and flexibility is really important. I mean, one note that I had scribbled down for myself is that, and it's kind of a mentality thing for me, is that I chose my family. I chose to have my family. I chose to get married. Like, I think a lot of sometimes it's easy to look at your family as an obligation or getting in the way of your goals. And I feel like my family is a gift. I'm fortunate to have them, and I certainly don't want to lose that in the pursuit of my goals. So I try to make sure that I'm communicating with my wife about what I need to accomplish, and then I bring her along with me, when I accomplish these things. So when the book is done, she's right there with me. That, yeah, awesome, you finished the book. Or if I'm chasing the end of the book, like I'm doing right now with a project, we can kind of talk about it and we talk through it, and she knows that we're like that's something we're kind of working through together. If that makes sense. Yeah, so, you guys are a team. Yeah, totally. You're a team in this. In the 50 books group, we sadly every now and then you see posts about frustration writers have with their spouses, or that they sense they are being a frustration with their spouse. There can be division, there can be stress, there can be bitterness that comes on when expectations in any relationship, right? Any relationship at all, when there are expectations and you don't see them being met. Bitterness can grow up. So one of your approaches for how to handle that is to be open about your communication and to try to bring your wife in on your writing team. Do you have any other tips about how to do that with your spouse or with your kids to make them feel like they are part of your team? It's not just that dad's up in his writing cave doing his own project, but that this is like a family endeavor. Mm-hmm. I mean, a big part of it is that I make money. That helps a lot. But I think if I didn't, again, it's like really just including them in the dream, right? I'm not like I love to play video games, but video games are also like a very solo pursuit. So I understand if my wife gets frustrated with me if I want to go spend 3 hours playing a video game, because it's not something I can bring her along with. Whereas writing it's something where I'm building and she's helping me with that, you know. So they get kind of tired of hearing me talk about about stories, but I bring them along. I talk to them about it. I don't know. I really just try to include them with it. I'm really aware of the fact that when I'm in here, like where I currently work, you know, I close the door, I'm kind of shutting them out, and I still want them to know that they're here with me in a certain way, you know? And then also if I don't know, if I need time, I ask for it. And then I try to be really accountable to myself about using that time effectively, you know? So if they give me time and I waste it, then I feel like I've kind of let them down in a certain way. So, because that's time I'm not spending with them, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Right. No, I have the same thing with Nana.
Yeah.
When I'm editing or when I'm writing and I'm not with Nana, I feel guilty that I'm not having stimulating conversation, that I'm not taking her out on activities. But then when I'm over there trying to help Nana, I feel like I should be getting my writing and editing done. And sometimes I feel like no matter, you know, which one I go to, I feel like I ought to be doing more. And that's another writer's trap that we can get caught in, that mentality that we're just not doing enough. And hey, maybe actually that's incentive that we need to keep going. Gilliam, what do you think? Do you feel like that? Because, you know, as a single mom, you've got to have all of this pressure too. Maybe even more.
Yeah. From the moment I wake up until the second I go to sleep, there is just this overhanging cloud of, did I get enough writing done? Did I give her enough attention? And it's just like that battle just never seems to win, you know? So if I'm just like, okay, I just need 1 hour, sweetie. Just give me 1 hour solid right here. You know, if your nose starts bleeding, come bug me. But if it's not like grams fell, don't bother me, okay? And she's getting better as she's getting older. I will say that. But then like I'm in there for that hour and she gets really excited about something and she just has to come tell me. And then she'll come running in here and then she'll be like, and then I just see it out of the corner of my eye. It's just like, oh, right, she's writing. And then she'll just kind of like sulk away and I just feel like the worst person in the world. And I'm like, no, you can show me. It's what is it? What do you want to show me? You are more important. I'm like, but I really do need to get back to writing. You know, and then if I do spend all day, you know, playing with her, and then I'm like, frack, I have that deadline and I haven't done a single thing. I could have gotten so much done if I had just taken an hour. And yeah, and you never win. That's at least how I feel like I never win.
Do you have any tricks that work for you to like drop back into your workflow, you know, if you get pulled out of it like that?
I am constantly thinking about whatever story it is that I'm writing. And that is from the opening scene all the way through to the ending. If there is a specific scene that I'm having trouble with, then I start from just right before that. And then I keep working through until something clicks. Or if it's exactly what I've written, I see it like a movie in my head. So like I see all the pictures and colors and people talking and whatnot. So I just keep replaying that movie over and over, sort of like on repeat in the back of my mind, so that when, you know, if I do, you know, not get to touch it, you know, until, you know, 10 o'clock at night, where I get, you know, at least an hour before my brain decides to shut off for the evening, I don't feel like I'm clawing at the walls to get back to where I was, because it's still fresh.
Yeah, it's neat that you can do that as a mom, as a single mom, as you know, you've got a job and everything, but still have headspace for that.
No, I don't. See, because it takes up all the headspace. I can be I'm surprised it hasn't happened very often during the show, because I can be in the middle of a sentence and then all of a sudden, what were we talking about? Literally will happen. I will have absolutely no recollection of any points that I was making, of what the conversation was even about. I know we were discussing something. Something was happening, and I'm just like, no, it's gone. You're going to have to remind me. And then it'll come back.
Yeah.
So my headspace gets so filled with my characters and their worlds that, yeah, sometimes I'm just sort of like glossed over in this la la land, and my mom will be sitting there just like, "You're thinking about a story, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Wait, what? Were you saying something?" And she's like, "Yes, I was. I just had this whole conversation with you." I'm like, "Oh shit, I'm sorry."
Now, does your mom like give you time maybe, or does she watch your daughter at all, or
Oh yeah, no, she does.
she
She
does?
is the most amazing person in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, every time I start talking about getting a second job, no, you're not. You need to be doing your writing so that you can publish books, and you know it's just going to take off for you, and it's going to be amazing. So you just get in that chair and start writing. I mean, Willow will just go and pull weeds or something. She'll like that. So you know, she is. I wouldn't be able to do this without her.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Hey, James, what do you do to get back into the flow once you've been interrupted?
That's so I try not, the only thing I really use paper notes for is stuff like that. So if I get pulled away, it is pretty tough for me to get back into the flow of things, but I will use a notebook. I carry a notepad around, and if something occurs to me, I'll write that down so I can jump back in. But sometimes if I'm staring, okay, I come back, I'm staring at the page. I just try and jot down like, these are the things that must happen, you know, and have that list underneath. So I work in Scrivener. And while I write out the summary, you know, in each kind of Scrivener header, the way you can do when it's in bulletin mode, I will still put that in the text so I can see where I need to go, and then also go back and just reread. Like, that's a pretty easy way to do it. You know, try and get back into the flow of what's happening. But it's hard. It's hard for me to do that, and so I'm kind of fortunate right now that my wife knows, like, please, like, give me that 1 hour of uninterrupted time. It's actually a little more difficult at work, where if I'm trying to work and then my phone rings or an email comes in and I need something, or I need to do something for work, that completely pulls my headspace back into work, you know, even on my lunch break. So I basically just will, yeah, kind of force, like, that's a brute force way I have to, these are the things that must happen. These are the character things that must happen. How does the character feel right now? You know, and I will focus on that. Here's how they feel. Here's where they need to be. What do I need to get out of this scene that I'm working on? How did I want the character to end in this scene? And oftentimes when I think through those things, that gets me through the next 500 words pretty easily. You know, and once I get in the flow, I can spit out 500 words, you know, quickly. It's just losing that flow kills me. So I got to try and get back into it, you know?
Right. Yeah. A couple things about what you just said I really like. One is remembering the characters' emotions and motivations. Mm-hmm. That helps your imagination to kind of lock in on them and figure out what they're going to say and do next. And the other thing is that you said 500 words. You didn't say 2,000 words. You didn't say 2,000 words. You just said
10,000.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
500. 500's manageable. We can do this, guys. We can.
Oh yeah, I think, you know, for me, like, 500 words is a basic scene, right? Like, that's the basic kind of internal arc in a scene for a character. And so if I can get through that, and I find typically if I aim for 500, I'm going to write 1,000, you know, at least 700. And once I'm at 700, 1,000 is easy, and then a chapter's done, you know. So that's kind of how and this is another thing. So I've become really, like, formulaic about the way that I write. Like, I guess if you were to read the novel, you might not notice it, but I tend to, like, I'll open the book up with 1,000-word chapters to get things moving. And then as I get into the middle third of the book, I move it into 2,000-word chapters. And then as I move into the end, it goes to 1,000-word chapters. And that helps me, like, keep things moving as I'm speeding it up into the end, where it'll even get down to, like, basically just 500-word to 700-word scenes. And so, because I know, okay, here's where I am in the story, here's where I am in the book, this is what I need to do, I don't have to overthink a lot of things about the outline. Like, I know this is what I need to do because, okay, I'm at the, you know, I'm 2/3 of the way through the book. If I haven't hit their complete bottom point yet, I've got a problem. And so I need to, like, all those things are in the back of my mind that make it so I don't have to, you know how they talk about, like, writing into the dark? Like, I'm not necessarily doing that because I know what needs to happen, right? So that helps me. It just helps me know where I need to go. So I'm not just jumping into the pool with no idea what I want to write, you know? And then part of the co-writing thing that I did want to touch on, why I would recommend it, is when it comes to world building and answering questions and that kind of stuff, like, I've got the benefit of Mal Cooper, who I can jump on, you know, our Slack channel and say, hey, what would happen with this in the world? and she gives me the answer and I'm good. Okay, boom. Or I just do that. Like one of the things we do, especially, or just most editors will do this. If you don't know what to do at a certain point, just put brackets around it. That's what I do in the text. And I just keep going. And then when I go back in my editing, I just search for those brackets and, fill in what I need to fill in. Yeah. But But the virtue of that is because I'm kind of cheating in a way. Like I know what I want to do for I know what the outline needs to be of the story. I don't have to think about the world building. I create my characters, and I always ask myself, like, what, and this is where, if I get blocked as well, I kind of think, like, what would the character do in this situation? Like, what's realistic? What makes sense? And then they kind of tell me, and I go forward with that. So I'm not overly making things up. Like, I mean, kind of like Kayleen, I kind of have the movie in my head, but I lose it all the time. So I have to ask the character, like, okay, they're shooting at you. What are you going to do now? Like, oh, what do you need? And then I kind of go forward from there.
It's really frustrating when they don't talk to you. Like one's just like the star of the show, and then so everything's getting built off that. And then, you're writing book 2, and then all of a sudden this one that you're just sort of writing in to write off towards the end is suddenly like, nah, bitch, I'm going to be a new main character. And you're like, motherfucker, why were you talking in the beginning?
I thought this was a family show. I was just going to flip off the screen, because that's what the character does sometimes.
So no, I do want to add to the 500 word thing as well. In one of the shows last year on live, name, beard, bald head, used to be a pastor. Why can I not remember his name all of a sudden? Steve, sorry. He had mentioned like frustration with the word counts, right? Mm-hmm. And how, that was really starting to, rake on his mind with his family life, right? Because I didn't hit my 2,000 words, and, it's affecting like my son who just wants to hang out and play with me, right? Because I'm getting mad at him and he just wants to play. Mm-hmm. And then he realized, okay, well, if I'm writing, let's just say 50,000 word stories, and I want to write 4 of those in a year, that's going to be that's 200,000 words I need to write in the year. How many words do I need to write then a day? And then you just divide that by 365. But if you can't write every day, like I don't count Thursdays, because that's just a day that there's so much going on for me. If I don't write on Thursday, there is no negative towards me. If I do, then it's awesome. So that's like my blackout day. So, take out every Thursday and then divide the rest of it by the 200,000. And like my word count was like 398 words a day for the amount of book lengths, for the amount of books that I thought I could write in a year. That was my word count. So
it's doable.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, you don't have to write 2,000 and 5,000 words. If you do, freaking rock on, freaking star. But
well, anyway. If you're writing more than that, because most full-time writers now seem to be writing between. Rick Partlow's in the chat being like 50,000, 4 books. That's all.
I mean, math in my head, Rick. Leave me alone.
No. I mean, that dude's a machine right now. He is the pinnacle that we need to aim for. But it seems like from what I've seen, a lot of folks that are writing full-time are doing between 6 and 8 books a year, depending. But yeah, that was one thing I wanted to talk about was. So I'm a fairly systematic thinker. Like if I tend to break things down, but one thing that was a huge like light bulb for me was it kind of started with NaNoWriMo. I did NaNoWriMo because I never thought that I could write 50,000 words in a month, and I did. But also 2 books I wanted to mention were Rachel Aaron's 2K to 10K, and then 5,000 words an hour by Chris Fox, which I hope at this point like everybody should be aware of those books, but. Until I knew how much I could, like one of the focuses of those books is just to figure out like what are you capable of? What can you actually do in an hour? Because I think one of the ways we don't think about writing is if it is your job, right? You know how many words you can do in an hour. If you work at McDonald's, you know how many burgers you can make in an hour. I know how many projects I can do in a week, but I'd never approached writing that way. And then the same way, so if I'm thinking about a novel as a project, and I know that I have 90 days within the pre-order window for Amazon, what is my actual like time I have to work in those 90 days? And so what's my deadline? Like, when do I need to have the book turned in? And I lay that down in the calendar and look at all my stuff in the midst there. Like, okay, we got a family trip here. We've got this happening here. These are the blackout dates. Like Kayleen said, I can't work on this day. And then I start to see like what days I actually have to write. and then I can do the math and figure out what, like, I actually need to do 2,000 words a day. And if I do it that way, I don't get stressed out. If I skip days, then I really start getting stressed out and can't do it. But then also I can kind of make promises to my family about, hey, 2,000 words, I need an hour a day. Can you give me that? And then I get that kind of agreement with my family, and that's what makes the work happen, And what is it? Atomic Habits. I think he talks about goals versus processes. And if you have a process in place, you will reach your goals. But a goal without a process isn't going to happen, So when I think about it systematically like that, that's what makes it possible for me to talk to my family and come up with a plan, and do those things. But if you don't do that and you just magically think it's going to happen, you could be frustrated,
Yeah. So how do you talk to a kid and get them?
See, I'm lucky where I have my wife who can help me, and that's why I think part of that is kind of figuring out, like, maybe who's on your team. Like if you have a family member who can help you. Kristen Oliphant, who does the Create If writing podcast, which is an awesome podcast. She's got a YMCA near her that has both childcare and a coffee shop. And she goes to the YMCA, and her kids love the childcare there. So she enrolls them in the childcare for 2 hours, and then that gives her 2 hours to write. So like, what are the ways you can find, if there are things around you like that? But yeah, I know you're right. And I think that's important too. Like, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and if you don't have that support system, like beating yourself up about it this might just not be the time in your life that you should do that. And I think that's important to realize too. And if you're still working toward your goal, and maybe it's just 100 words a day, even in a year, that could be a substantial amount of words, but that's better than nothing. So.
Yeah. All right, we'll talk more about, sorry.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, I do want to add before we get to the show sponsor, because I know that's where you're going. I don't recommend this to all the people, but what I did with my little one was I wrote a book with her. So I wrote a children's book when she was 4 years old. She was telling me this story that she was making up on her way to daycare, and then it kind of stuck with me all day. So then I rewrote what I could remember of it, and kind of did an editorial pass on it and read it back to her when I picked her up. And she's like, yeah, but it was this that happened. And I was like, okay. So I started writing that down, and then she started to get kind of excited. She's like, oh, this is an activity we're doing together. And after I started putting that together, I'm like, you know what, sweetie? She goes, what? I'm like, this is what mommy does with her books. This is exactly what I do. When I say I need to write, this is what I'm doing. And she goes, oh, that's so much fun. I want to read your books. And I'm like, no. When you're a little older, though.
Oh, that's huge, though. I mean, how awesome is that she can experience that with you,
Yeah, so now she's on book 4, and next one I need to make is in space. We just finished Mermaids. So, yeah, no, she's taking up more of my writing time with her books, which is why I say don't recommend it unless you really going to be in there with it. But no, it's super fun. And that was how I got her to understand, was being like, we're going to write one together, and I'm going to take you through the editorial process super hard. Anyway.
What do you mean, mommy? Don't make me cry.
No, I was nice. I'm nice. I'm nice about it. But, not all the characters couldn't die from a flaming sword and turned into statues. Like, the main character, that just couldn't happen to the main characters. So anyway.
She's learning about her powers of imagination and creativity. She's learning about English. Former English teacher. That's wonderful. She's learning what she can do as a person, but also now she has a real understanding of what mommy's doing and why it's really important for her to be on board with your dream too. And she's got that taste. This is awesome. That's great mothering. Well done. Awesome.
Oh, thank you.
High five.
So we do have a show sponsor tonight. And tonight, y'all are in for a little bit of a special treat, because our lovely guest here is so itching and so excited. He really wanted to read the show sponsor. And I was like, I have so many show sponsors ahead of me. You may or may not only be on the show once. Who am I to deny your great and powerful dream? I can give you this gift. So to this gift I give to thee. If you are down there on the show sponsor section of our lovely little document, I have it all written out for you.
I'm looking at it.
Away we go.
Well, I also read where Rick Partlow said my voice is not sounding as deep as on my podcast. So I'm going to try and maybe, well, I don't know. We've also got, I'm going to practice Yudhanjaya's Wijeratne. I believe that's how you pronounce his name, I think. And if I mess that up, I apologize, Yuda. Please don't hold that against me. Okay, so our show sponsor for tonight is Horizons Beyond, a Keystroke Medium anthology, which brought you the Writer's Journey podcast. The future is now. Torn from the headlines of next year's news, Keystroke Medium brings you 10 stories, not from the distant past or centuries in the future, but close enough to change your life very soon. This anthology will take you on a journey you won't soon forget. Included, Ozymandias by Yudhanjaya Wijeratne, The Big Box Store by Patricia Gilliam, I Am Christopher by K.R. McClellan, Clean Sweep by C.C. Ekeke, C481 by Kayleen Williams, Salvation of the Seas by Andrew Gates, X-Roads by Walt Robillard, Spark Joy by IQ Malcolm, The God in the Details by Rick Partlow, and Randall Duchamp and the Strip Club of Tomorrow by James S. Aaron. Book link in the show notes, so check that out. How's that? All right.
Beautiful.
I'm a little froggy, so I wasn't quite as movie voice guy as I would like to be.
No, it was great. It was great. I didn't have to read all those names. No, I'm kidding.
It is an awesome anthology, and one thing I want to say too is, please, if you check it out and love it, leave us a review, because right now the anthology could definitely use some reviews, and definitely let folks know to check it out, because there's some great work in there. So please do that.
Everything he just said.
Yes.
All right, so before the break, we were talking about communication, and we covered how your family does understand and support your goals. Would you say that's true? Yeah.
Most of the time. Yeah.
Part of that's because you're really clear about what you need from your schedule, and you and your spouse, you've worked out who does what and when, so you've got good communication. Is there anything you want to add on to that?
I would say that my wife also really, I've been married before, so I learned some lessons. But my wife is also really clear about what she needs. And I'm also, if I'm going to go write, before I do that, I check in with her and say, hey, do you need anything? And I've just learned that kind of, like, even if it's just she's stuck with the baby, needs a glass of water, or please bring me the remote or something like that, that kind of wins a lot of points. But just kind of making sure that we're both in the same sheet of music. Like, hey, I'm not disappearing. I'm going to go do this. You know where I am. If you can reach me, we actually chat a lot using Google Hangouts. So if she needs to reach me, we can chat using that, which pops up on my screen. But I've just learned to, like, I will ask questions until it's like stupid, because I want to make sure that we're on the same, we both understand each other. And even then it still gets screwed up, but, and then I try not to get, things are going to get in the way. That's just how it is. And I don't get upset about that. I just adjust and make a new plan. One of the things that we say a lot at work is control what you can control. And so I really have just come to accept that at this point, with the baby at home, like, I can't control time when I'm at home. That's just that doesn't work. And so, like, when I'm at work, I have more control over that time. And then I've also I've used a co-writing space a few times. So, like, when I was finishing Eva Destruction, the last book I just finished with Mal, I actually took some vacation days and spent time in a co-working space, because then I really could just sit down and hammer out words, but I could control that. If I went home, I knew I wasn't going to get the work done necessarily. So I don't get mad about that. I just make a plan to work around it. So.
And that kind of leads into the next question, which, again, we've sort of touched on. So what if your family is illogical?
Right.
Kids or the spouse, or,
Yeah, and that's where, for me, I would focus on those things you can control. So if you have time at work, maybe it's your lunch break, maybe it's going to work, or maybe even you've got an hour when you leave work that you can take a break. And that's where, again, that power of consistency, like, even if it's just a half hour every day and you get those 1,000 words out, you will have a book in a year. You just got to do that consistently. And then maybe for this time in your career, that's what you're doing, is a book a year. And, if you're following, if selling is part of your plan, then maybe you just need to accept that, okay, for these 3 years, I'm going to focus on being a parent. I'm writing, this is what I'm doing for my writing, and then I'm banking some books and I'm going to publish those, as a rapid release strategy or something like that. Or maybe like my focus during this time in my career is to build relationships. And so maybe the writing isn't the biggest thing I can do, but I can write short stories for anthologies. And like Keystroke has some great anthologies you can submit to. There's plenty of them out there. Also just building those relationships. There's plenty of things you can do for other authors that are in that place in their career. Like people might not think about this, but every time you interact with an author and you just like interact on their post or like on their page or be active on their page, like that is a bit of currency. Like you're helping them out because that attracts other people to interact on their page. And before you know it, their group is becoming larger and things like that. And so you can still be part of the community and still build relationships, even if you're not maybe actively writing the way you might, and this market changes so fast that as long as you're engaged and paying attention, when you are ready to write, you can jump right in with both feet, and be successful. So, I mean, that's kind of what I would look at. I mean, other things, contracts, like Kayleen's daughter might not be old enough, but like when my son was 10, we were big on contracts and, hey, if you want this much screen time, this is what you need to do. And daddy needs this amount of time. So, I mean, that's actually kind of fun. Like my son was a huge Nintendo head. So this was really pretty easy. Like you go play and you play Mario for 2 hours. That gives me 2 hours. And then we're going to come back together and make dinner together. Right. And then you're going to do the dishes and clean the table and that kind of stuff. But having it on the contract, then if they broke, I could be like, well, Will, you wrote the contract. Do you need to change the contract? Okay.
It's going to be a penalty for that.
Yeah. But that was a way that, like I got his buy-in with stuff, and this was before my wife and I got married. But I think it's really tough if you have a spouse who doesn't understand or value what you do. Like I put in our notes, like I don't want to dig into relationship stuff too much, but I think it's so important in your life to have a spouse who values what you do. Like I don't crochet, but I know I can see the benefits it gives my wife. So whenever she crochets, like that's her time. She should go crochet, I want her to be fulfilled in the things that she does, even if I don't understand what they are. And I hope that folks have that in their life. If they don't, where can you get that help? Do you have a parent? Do you have a friend? Is there somebody else that can help you create space to write? So.
Yeah, part of the stresses with that is, writing takes up so much of your mental energy and so much of your time. And then most books are not a hit when they first come out. We had Joe Solari on the show, and he said for a lot of the authors he knows, it's like the 7th book before you start selling your backlist too. So those were perfectly good books, but for some reason they just weren't big in the market. So then the finances are tight. You're putting in so many hours and then they're not selling, and it can get harder and harder and harder to have these conversations with your spouse. So do either of you have any ideas on how you can talk to your spouse and express, how important this is to you and what you need for them, and to still to let the spouse know that you value them and that we're in this together? Like how do you have a conversation?
What do you think, Kayleen? Do you have anything?
Well, I talked to my mom quite a bit about, writing and the business, what it means, where I'm at with it, costs, that are involved in that. And, part of it. Okay. So no, it literally just happened. What was the question again?
Okay. So you're writing so much, and the books aren't selling.
Okay.
And the conversation comes down to, should we keep writing, or should you keep writing?
Okay. There we go. Let's go back.
Should you keep writing?
Yes. So like one of the things that I made very apparent, and like this is reality, is when I start publishing, it might not happen right away, because every single day 1,000 books or more are being published, and I don't really know marketing very well. So how am I supposed to get other people to find my books if I don't even understand marketing? So you need to give me time to be able to learn that kind of thing. And I don't really understand what it is, like these genre things going on. Like I really didn't, because that's not how I picked books. I would just pick them if the title sounded really cool and if the cover looked really cool. It could be a romance, it could be a horror, it could be a sci-fi, it could be a techno thriller. Didn't matter what it was, I would read it. And anyway, and so, you know, she'd kind of nod and she would be like, you know, that makes sense. Because I talked to her about it from a logical perspective. You know, this is what I hope happens. But in order for that to happen, you know, these are things that I'm realizing I need to understand, and that's going to take me time. You know, so I've gone through 3 covers on my first series, and none of them have hit the genre marks because I was still learning what those genre expectations were. You know, and I was even learning what the genre my story was because I wrote it for myself. I wasn't writing to market, right? And so that was another hurdle that I've had to go through, was like trying to figure out where in this world, you know, in the Amazon world, in the Kindle world, does my book fit? And that drove her crazy. She's like, it's just a book and it is what it is and it's fantastic. And, you know, I'm not going to go in there and type, what did she say? It was hilarious. Romantic werewolves diving off of spaceships. And I'm just like, but people do write those things. And I need to know these things. It took 2 years to get it through her head that was important. And she was actually on her phone and she was on Google and we were trying to find, what was it? It was a flower that was in our yard that hadn't grown yet. And she's like, well, it kind of looks like a purple bell flower with big leaves. And I'm like, you just did a freaking keyword string. And she goes, what? I'm like, that was a keyword string. That is something I need to know for my books. So It was taking the time to have her understand a little bit of what I need to do. And that's given her a lot more patience with all the stuff. Long-winded story, but yeah.
Well, you took the time. You took the time to explain it, and like Bard brought up a good point in the chat, is that people tend to be more supportive of your stuff if you show that you're interested in theirs, and if you take the time to explain it, and you invest in explaining it, and if you're passionate about it, I think it can be hard with writing, you know, especially if somebody hasn't, you know, we all kind of have a leg up, and everybody listening to this is, you know, wants to be a better writer, wants to learn how this market works, wants to understand how the new, you know, this new publishing model works. And I think it is possible, like, lay out a roadmap for yourself with, as a writer, that wasn't, you know, even like 3 years ago, like trying to get this information was very difficult. And so now I think, you know, if you can kind of explain, depending on what you want out of your writing, you know, if you can explain that to your family, what you're trying to accomplish and bring them along. I mean, to me, that's kind of better than I'm saving up to buy a jet ski. I love, you know, jet skis are fun, but this is also like maybe an investment in our future and an investment in, and it's, you know, it's not just, I mean, that's the thing about writing genre fiction, right? I guess we're writing things that hopefully probably have a profit motive and can sell. So it's a little bit different than just writing, you know, literary that may never sell. I don't want to pick on literary, but I think maybe if you can lay out for your spouse but that mutual respect thing is huge. I think if you're invested in them and they're invested in you, that feels like it should be a no-brainer to me. But I've totally been in relationships where it wasn't. So I understand when it's hard to, like, I like this thing and my spouse isn't interested at all. What are some ways to maybe get them to buy in on that? And I've been through marriage counseling where, it was like contracts were part of that. Like, we're just going to spend time together, whether we like to or not. And I don't know, that can be a way to at least kind of start a bridge, you know, if that is a way to do that. It's hard. I wish I had a better answer for you for that.
I
don't know.
Marriage counseling too. I did marriage counseling too, and one of the biggest takeaways was counseling is amazing.
Yeah.
And I wish I had done it a lot earlier, like not waited until there's a problem to go ahead and do it. But it's great to have someone who's educated and knows what questions to ask, like educated in counseling, right? They know how to help you unpack things. They know how to help you think through things. And, you know, maybe, you know, we're not going to say couples should go to counseling or anything like that. But maybe a third party is helpful for getting through certain discussions, especially if the third party, is certified and experienced, and, you know, it might be something.
Yeah, I mean, especially if, those out there who, your spouse, your best friend that you live with, your father, your grandpa, whoever it is that is really close in your life that you may be living with, or the person that you want to go to talk about, your writing, what's going on with that. And they just keep harping on you. Like, it's not realistic. They don't believe in you. Having that third party might be helpful, and definitely being open with them, well, why is it important to you? And then you could, just like I do with my mom when she couldn't understand why the genre was so important. It took me 2 years to get her to understand why it was important, but I kept finding different ways to try and get her to understand why. And now that she does, I'm telling her, hey, I'm writing for an anthology for space opera. Now she's asking me, well, what's space opera? Instead of, I don't know what the spacey thing is. Just that's cool that you're writing for it, though. Now she's interested because now she gets it. So.
Yeah, that's a big question.
Right.
I mean, for me, it also comes back to control what you can control. And if I can't control my spouse, I can't control my home life. Do I have a period of time? If I have 8 hours during the day when I'm at work, and I take my lunch break and I have an hour, I can control that hour, And so what do I choose to do with that? So maybe I'm going to take my lunch every day so I have time to sit somewhere. I'm going to get a Chromebook or something that, I open it up and it's instant on and I can just start writing, or maybe I'm going to handwrite because nothing's going to get in the way of me doing that. And I can control that. And that's because if you try and pin, a process on something that you can't control, or especially kind of affects you emotionally, like as soon as you go home, if you're like emotions are in a twist because as soon as you walk in the door, things are tough at home. You can't expect yourself to be creative in that environment, So I would just not try to do that. You're just going to beat yourself up and feel bad about your writing, and your writing should be, an escape. It should make you feel good. It should make you feel like you accomplished something when you do it. So, I guess that's the best advice I could give about that. Like, I really want everybody to be able to talk these things through and have a supportive spouse both ways, but that's not always the case. I think we shouldn't pretend that it's that way. So.
I agree. So before we continue further down this relationship conversation of emotionality, what are some resources that you would recommend, for writing more, better, faster, getting to know yourself better and what you
So those books I mentioned, 2K to 10K, by Rachel Aaron, that's Aaron, just like my name. The 5,000 Words an Hour by Chris Fox. And again, what those books are about is kind of digging into your writing process and figuring out like how long it takes you to write a certain amount. And then Rachel Aaron has a really good, she's basically an outliner, but she talks about what steps she took to get, just increase her word counts. But I think for somebody who thinks that like, there's no way I could write 10,000 words in a day, like that book will show you how to do it. And I've done it on a few magical days. Like on a really good day for me, I can do like 6,000 to 8,000 words. But I never thought that was possible before I read that book. And so I think it's important. Yeah, you need to know how much you can do. You need to like other resources. I think there was a question, what is a co-working space? So this kind of depends on where you live, but they've been like, we have a big software community in my area. And so these spaces have kind of grown up where you pay a certain amount per hour and you can just go, they'll have like touchdown spaces where it's just a desk and internet. And you can just go sit there with, with your laptop and work and have headphones on. Nobody's going to bother you. And that's a place you can go work. A library might be a possibility. I work on a campus, so we've got lots of, restaurants and the student union and spaces where I could go sit. But even for me, campus is kind of hard because my job encompasses the whole campus. So it's hard for me to be in a writing headspace when I'm on that campus. But then like I've got a local writing nonprofit that recently created like a writer's space where you pay a certain amount per month and you can go write, you just show up there and you can go write. And so that's a really good third place where you can go. Coffee shops, bars. Bars are kind of loud, but I like that noise because it's easy for me to shut out. It's like white noise in the background, and places that don't have Wi-Fi. Like one thing about bars is they don't typically have Wi-Fi. So if I go there, I don't. They typically have coffee. You could drink coffee or water or whatever, and yeah, it's a good way to like minimize distractions. But that's a really good resource that I use quite a bit. Other things like I put a lot of thought in this. Like I've really chased a lot of different tools. Like I'm a collector of keyboards. I've got a bunch of different laptops. I love ThinkPads because they have the best keyboards. But one thing I'll say is like once you have something, for me personally, like I resist the urge to move to anything different. Like I don't even like to update Windows. Like I want to be able to open my laptop and start working. I don't want anything getting in the way because that time is so precious, right? Yeah. And I actually really love Chromebooks because you can pick them up super cheap on eBay. And I mean, I've got there. Oh yeah, there's a brand of Chromebook I love. It's the Acer C720, and I've got these for. It has a caps lock. I've gotten it for as cheap as $40. Like people sell these things. You can install Windows on them if you want to, but I love it because you open it up, instant on. I can just go right to Google Drive and start writing, and nothing gets in the way of that. You know, I don't have to wait for it to load. It's not trying to prompt me with other crap. So that's really important to me. You know, what are some other resources? The Pomodoro method has been huge for me. I would really recommend if folks haven't done that, because that's a way of kind of training your brain that once that 25-minute timer starts, you're going to write. And the more you do it, the more it becomes a muscle to know, you know, I can write this much in this amount of time. And that's kind of been the biggest game changer for me over time, is that it's like a job. You know, I know how long it takes me to do something at work. I know how long it takes me to write something. You know, I know how long it takes me to, you know, I'm going to write an 8,000 word short story. I'm going to break that into 500 word chunks. That's this many, you know, this many different scenes. I put that into Scrivener. I plot it. And then I start working systematically from there. And I tend to be really like, that's how I approach it. I know for other people that's really hard, but for me that, it just lays things out. So I don't have to overthink it, you know? And that's what makes it easy to jump in and jump out. And I think that if that's, like when I started, I never would have called myself an outliner, but as time goes on and it becomes more like this is a job and I do it, that's more and more important to how I do things, you know?
Someone could take that Pomodoro method and add it to their schedule, like get to your workplace half an hour early, get to your desk half an hour early, and then, you know, start the timer, do the Pomodoro, or even like after work ends, stay a half an hour late, and then do one more Pomodoro. So do one in the morning, one afternoon, and that would keep away the house chaos. You know.
Absolutely, yeah.
When you get focused on being at home, right, and not have your headspace.
And I think, that's a really good point. So that, because that's one thing I've been criticized before. Like as a writer, like you're always thinking about something else. You're always like your brain is always somewhere else. And I've really tried to separate those two things, right? So I'm like I'm focused when I'm at home with my family, or I'm not I mean, come on now, we're always thinking about that in the back of our minds, but I can be more present with my family because I'm not trying to do two things at once. So I think that's a really important point. Yeah.
All right. Other tools or resources?
Some other things I had that Alpha Smart Neos, if folks aren't familiar with that, that's basically, if you just search eBay for Alpha Smart Neo or Neo 2, you can pick those up for like $25 to $30. And it's a keyboard that it takes like 3 AA batteries. It's kid proof. It's mostly waterproof. They're actually designed for schools. And it's like a calculator, like it's instant on and you can just type into it. And then basically the way it works is that once you type into it, anything that will take like a USB input, you can plug the Alpha Smart into it, like even your phone, and you hit send, and it's like a keyboard where it sends keyboard inputs to the thing. And so it's bulletproof, and they're really good. Like you can throw it on the couch. You can have it on the couch while you're if I'm watching the baby or hanging out with her, I can use that just to get ideas down or to write. Like a lot of people just use them for drafting because the screen only has like 5 lines of text on it. So it's really not good for editing, but they're really good for drafting. And I'm kind of addicted to those things. Like a Chromebook is really great because you can do a ton of stuff with a Chromebook, but an Alpha Smart is even better because it's indestructible. You drop it, kid bangs it, you know, it's all right, and you don't. you don't lose the words, but it's a way that if that is the only way you can do work, that is a really good tool to use. And then the other thing is I have struggled with dictation, but I know for some folks, dictation is a really good tool. And I've heard a ton of stories from parents that take the kids out in a stroller and dictate while they walk. And, more and more people have Bluetooth headsets, so they don't look crazy while they're talking as they walk. But I have a hard time with it. Like our novel Vesta Burning that I dictated, and it was like terrible. It was so messed up and garbled, and it was bad for me. But I know that it's worked really well for other folks, so I would recommend that. And there's so many tools now on iOS on your iPhone, or Android has a bunch of tools. You can do drag and dictate but you can test out the free tools and see how it works for you before you invest in Dragon. But that's a really good way to do it as well. Like I remember Kevin J. Anderson was on the show, right? And he dictates everything, even though he pays for a service to do it. There are plenty of free resources out there that can do that for you. And at least for me, like one thing dictation is really good for is I at least just get the story out. And so I can be doing something like walking with the baby or whatever and talking, and she thinks that's hilarious, but I'm just kind of like talking the story, right? With no intention of really doing anything with it. Although I do, input it into the computer so I have it as a text file. I think Josh Hayes does that as well, just to get the story out, and then he plays with that. So
one thing I want to add with dictation, the way that I like to use it, when I'm hitting, because I always hit a mark in my writing where I can't go forward until I start handwriting it. So that's where like I get past my bridges, is by handwriting it, and then it's usually like pages of handwritten stuff, which then is going to take me quite a long time to then type it all up. And ever since I got the Dragon, I have all those handwritten notes, and 3 hours of typing is now 20 minutes of talking. So I have substantially saved myself so much time. I mean, it took a bit of time to, train the Dragon, get used to the dictation, but the way that I do it now, that's how I use dictation. So
yeah. I mean, so some other tools I haven't used them personally, but I know there are a ton of people now that are like typing books on their phones, that are really good with inputting text. And so I've heard a ton of stories about that. And so that's a good tool. And then kind of the last thing I wanted to mention is a resource that it's something I've learned from Mal Cooper. So we write the Aeon 14 novels into a Word template that is basically the way an Aeon 14 book looks. And I bet she would share that with anybody if they were curious, like what that Word document looks like. But basically, once that Word document is set up, like you open up the Word doc, I'll open up the last novel, I delete out what was in the meat of it, and then set out the outline for the new book. And we use standard headers. It's a science fiction book, so like every chapter has a header of where it takes place and time and stuff like that. But then all this stuff at the beginning, like the table of contents, everything that comes at the end, like the list of books and the call to action and all that good stuff, it's already in there, but it looks like a book. So there's like a mental switch there for me, at least, that this book already exists. I've already started creating it. I'm not doing something out of nothing, which I think you sometimes get when you're looking at just a blank Scrivener doc or a Word doc. And then also once the book is like, we edit in that same document, go through, clean it all up. And then, I mean, I own Vellum. So I was like, why would you not use Vellum? That's crazy. But Mal was like, nope, we use Word, and it works. Like uploads Word straight to Amazon, both for like, there's some slight changes for the print edition, but boom, that's the workflow. And so having that workflow, like just like having the world building, once you start that's another thing to make things easy is write a series, right? Because you already know your characters, you already know your world building, you already know what you're doing. You don't have to recreate the wheel. But it just makes that so much easier for each new project. And when you have all this other stuff in your mind, anything you can do, I think, to get those shortcuts in the workflow is going to just keep the wheels turning, as you go. So.
All right,
once you find the process. Sorry, I'm totally talking over you.
Matt would know all about workflow. Aren't they publishing like a book every Thursday?
We do. It depends, but yeah, when things are really clicking, there's almost a book every Thursday. I'd say probably every 2 weeks right now.
That's insane.
Yeah.
But amazing. That is amazing and insane, and I can't wait to start doing that as well. One day, maybe. We'll see. Let's try myself that hard.
But I mean, that's a big part of it. Like, I don't think that she would actually even express it that way, that there's a workflow, but a lot of it comes from the time she spent in software development, and just, if you can make something easy, make it easy. And it's something I've really realized from writing in someone else's IP is that, and even if I was going to start developing my own IP, I think that's part of like why a series can be really successful, because even in the same way the readers get bought into your characters, like you do too, and you don't have to recreate the wheel every time with a new story, you know? So if you've got a lot of other stuff in your life, it's that much easier to settle in and just write that, you know, that story. So yeah, that was my last resource. Make things easy. What else did I have on my list? So what folks don't realize is, like, I sent Kayleen and Lauren like this giant novel of a brain dump that I really didn't realize was as long as it was. I guess,
good.
yeah.
I'm first scrolling. I'm like, what haven't we talked about? A question about. But we are a little bit over. But you were starting to say something a little bit ago, Lauren. I talked over.
I think I said it.
Oh, okay.
It was about workflow. Publishing.
So let's see. There are. Oh yeah, I'm gonna check the chat real quick. Question on the Pomodoro. Got correct spelling, I believe. Pomodoro. Pomodoro.
And that's, you know, if you're not familiar with it, Pomodoro basically is writing in 25-minute breaks. You write for 20, and you set a timer, right? So set a timer for 25 minutes. I have mine right here. So you can write for 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break, write for another 25 minutes, you know, take a 5-minute break or 10-minute break. One thing I've done with my writing groups as well is parallel play is what we call it. And so a bunch of us will get together on a Saturday, and we basically do the Pomodoro method together, and then take maybe a bit of a longer break, like 15 minutes to, you know, chill, eat some food, talk, and then jump back into it. And so there's a little bit of peer pressure as well. So that's fun to do if you've got like local writers, but it's just a way to train your brain.
Right, and that also gives you a location in which to go, so you're not at home. You can go.
Totally.
That's
a really good point. You know, if you had a group of people together, like one person could provide childcare and other folks could write, and you could trade off.
Smart.
That would be
genius.
Crazy.
Writers.
Yes.
We're always thinking of new ways to be able to write. That is what we do. So yeah, this has been an amazing episode. I mean, a lot of what we talked about really comes down to, you know, being honest with yourself. You know, what do you want your writer business to be? And a lot of what, like Michael Andrews says, what's your mountain? You know, is your mountain making money? What do you need to do? What can you realistically do to get up that mountain? And involve your family. Let them know, this is what I'm doing. This is what it's going to take. Hey, I know we're always busy on Fridays. I won't write that day, but at least give me, you know, 1 hour, 2 hours on these days. And then, you know, have that communication open, and, you know, don't give up. Never give up. Keep writing, even if it's a sentence a day, even if it's rereading that first paragraph that you wrote. At least do something in your writing, a little bit, tiny little bit, makes a big difference.
Consistency wins every time.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for coming on the show, James.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was fun.
You let our viewers, listeners, all the people out there know where they can find you and your work.
Yeah. So, what's that?
And podcast.
Yes.
And podcast. Oh, I didn't have that in there.
JamesAaron.net is the website, and speculative.work is the podcast, which is a mostly weekly author diary where you can hear me talk about stuff I've screwed up. So it's good fun. And then also aeon14.com is that's got everything Aeon 14 related. And we've got a really good Facebook group that we're totally into, just astronomy and space in general, not just Aeon 14. So it's a fun place to hang out. And that's facebook.com/group/Aeon 14 fans. So you can come check that out.
All right, everybody, go check him out. Right. All his listeners, all that whatnots. To everyone in the live chat, thanks for hanging out with us. And that is from the last show before. Not gonna be let us know what you thought about the show in the comments, and show your support with the thumbs up and hitting the subscribe button, the little bell. And all that good stuff, so you know when we have more shows going on. For Lauren Moore, thank you for joining us on your writer's journey. We'll see you next time. Talk about some reading, writing, and everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium's The Writer's Journey. Good night, guys.